Hello and welcome to another episode of V's Perspective. A lot of things have happened in the past 2 or 3 weeks. Let me start with some of the events that have happened yesterday, which is a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Remember, the first point on this is that India hasn't called it a ceasefire, it's a technical pause. And the Indian Air Force has come out to say that the operation is still on, which means we remain vigilant even as the situation unfolds. Now, in particular, in this video, I wanted to sort of probe the role of the United States because there's been a lot out there. The U.S. was consistently um, involved in talking to both sides, but only after a point. Initially, the, if you look at J.D. Vance's statement, the Vice President of the United States clearly came out and said we have nothing to do with India and Pakistan. Their expectation was that this could, there are two or three things. One is that the United States expected the India Pakistan escalatory cycle not to go to the nuclear spectrum. Second, there was an obvious tacit endorsement of India's actions post the Pahalgam attacks. Clearly, it is no secret that the role of Pakistan in actually sending terrorists across, not just sending terrorists across the border to India, but actually incubating that kind of terrorism inside its borders since a long time. And the US has been complicit in that for a fairly long period of time. And there's no better insider than the United States to know this, of the state of Pakistan in terms of its joined at the hips nature with terrorism. So I think initially the retribution that Pakistan invited by sending its trained terrorists to Pahalgam was clearly an acknowledgement in the United States. So there is that baseline that the United States understands Pakistan's role in terms of it and its nature and its evolution in terms of a state which is a state sponsor of terrorism. Second, we are in the age of Donald Trump administration, where strategic decisions are as fickle as any decision of daily life, right? You have the president of the United States actually tweeting and equating and creating a false equivalence between India and Pakistan in terms of establishing trade between US and India in the same breath. And I think that should be one thing that is unacceptable to India. That is one thing that a false equivalence is something that we are not going to be associated with. And I think it should be made clear to the United States in terms of how we look at our relations with the United States. There's got to be a trade and strategic relationship with the U.S. on its own channel. But when it comes to bilateral relations with Pakistan, there can be no triangularity of it. There cannot be a hyphenation of India and Pakistan. And I think the Trump administration better understands that there's got to be a distance between the two. Now, to the extent that the Trump administration actually and Donald Trump actually tweeted about India, about establishing relations with Pakistan and India in the same breath to achieve this stopping of salvos from both sides, I think is understandable. But I think any extension of this understanding that a false equivalence between India and Pakistan can be drawn in the same tweet and in the same policy arc, I think has to be dismantled by India. Now, India has done fairly. India has signaled fairly strongly to that effect because we have not. The government of India has not taken a stance in terms of the role of the United States, and I think we should not. To the extent that there's been a back channel, I think it's between both sides. That's up to United States to talk with any other country that they feel comfortable with. But I think going forward, any hyphenation is not acceptable, and I think India should make that point fairly fairly importantly to the United States in as as clear terms as possible. That's one. The second, quickly, is the fact uh, that this may, of course, there's some rounds doing some news doing rounds about the um, alarming news about possible movement of nuclear weapons, or intent of nuclear weapon use by Pakistan. Now, it obviously, the first point is the fact that it resonates Stephen P. Cohen when he said that Pakistan negotiates with the world um, by pointing a gun to its own head, and I think that's pretty visible. Now, the takeaway from this is that the Indian strategic forces, needs, of course, to go to the drawing board and think about its response in such scenarios in the future. But I think if there is any merit to the role of the United States, it should be limited to this technical pause. And I think nothing beyond this should be acceptable from the Indian standpoint. Let me stop here in in relation to this topic, and come back with some other thoughts.